Hi guys, I've recently begun painting a Red Corsair army for myself, and for that I'm using these grimdark industrial bases, and I thought I would share how I do them with you guys, so please enjoy. The first step is to add some cork to the base, and I'm using some 5mm thickness that I've gotten from Green Stuff World. I'm going to glue it to the base, but first I'm going to make sure that the entire piece fits within the base. So I just need to take a bit off here. Almost there. Like so. And make sure that whatever miniature you're using, that it fits onto the cork. Perfect. Next, I'm grabbing some super glue and gluing it to the base. Like so. Next up, I'm adding some texture to the rest of the base, and the one I'm using is brown earth from Vallejo, but you can use really any texture paint because we're going to prime this later. But I'm going to apply this with my texture tool. I'm adding this because otherwise it will look too flat when I apply the lava effect, in my opinion. But once you have applied this, let it dry fully. While the texture is still drying, I can add some textured plastic, which I've also gotten from Green Stuff World. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut out a piece. Just make sure that it's large enough to cover the cork. And then I'll grab some super glue once more and apply the plastic to the cork. Like so. When the super glue is dry, I can then cut off the excess using a scissor. I'm using a small scissor for this. The glue is dry, so now I can decorate the base a bit. But remember when you do this that you need to have room enough for your miniature to fit. But I'm not going to add one in this video because I want to show you exactly what I'm doing. So what I've got here is a couple of rocks, which I gotten from the Armor Painter's Battlefield rocks. And I also got a skull, which I got from the Battlefield Trophy set by Citadel. So I'm just adding some glue where I want the bits to be. Like so. Now before we continue, make sure that the texture and everything else is completely dry. Once everything was dry, I went outside and undercoated it with Chaos Black. Usually I have a Red Corsair standing here now, also undercoated in Chaos Black. But as I said, I'm not adding a miniature to this base because I wanted to see what I'm doing. And the first thing I'm going to paint now is the stones, which is essentially all the cork. It's the stone on the base and beneath the metal. And for that I'm using a base coat of mechanical standard grey. I'm just going to thin it a little with some water. Like so. And then just paint all the stones with mechanical standard grey. Or any dark grey color will do, really. I know this is a bit involved for making a base, but I usually make several bases at once. This is just to show you guys how I do it for my Red Corsairs. Following that base coat, I'm then adding a shade, and the one I'm using is an ink by Green Stuff World, Atramentum Black. If you don't have this color, you can use non-oil as a substitute. So just add this to your palette, like so, and apply it all over the rocks. And this needs plenty of time to dry. The shading is dry, so next I'm going to add a dry brush with Astorath Red, which is a dry paint from Citadel. And it's a bit of a heavy dry brush, mind you. I'm just removing most of it on my tissue here. Just testing the strength. This seems to be good. And then just dry brush the stones all over. And it doesn't really matter if you hit the surrounding areas, we'll paint those over later anyways. The stones are looking quite hot right now.
Ooh, hot.
Oh,
Hot.
yeah,
All right.
that's hot. That is hot.
So next I'm going to paint the lava. And I'm beginning with a base coat of deep red by AK Interactive. Thin it down with water. And then apply it all over the texture we added in the beginning. Just like so. Following that, I'm taking some medium orange, also by AK Interactive, and adding a heavy dry brush all over the red we just painted. And following that, I'm adding my final dry brush with deep yellow. And with that, it's almost time for the crackle paint. But first I'm going to add some white glue, PVA glue for some of you. And I've added some to my palette, and I'm going to thin it down with a bit of water. And then I'm going to add it all over the parts where I want the lava to be. And let this dry fully. This will help improve the size of the cracks when we add our crackle paint. Just like so. And as I said, let it dry completely. And with that, it's time to add our crackling paint. And I'm using Martian Iron Earth from Citadel, soon to be rebranded Warhammer color. And what I'm doing is quite simple. I'm adding this all over the lava, and I'm adding quite a thick layer for bigger cracks. Like so. And this takes quite a few hours to dry and crack completely, so what I usually do is just leave this overnight, which I'm also going to do in this case. And then I'll be right back. Just like so. Yeah, that about does it. And then it's time to get cracking. And the crackling paint is now ready. Next I'm taking some Smoke Black by AK Interactive, which I thinned down with water. And then I'm painting all the individual flakes. And it doesn't really take as long as it might seem, but just go around the lava and plug in all the flakes with this color. And with that we have a cool lava effect, but I'm going to take it a step further. Next I'm taking some red ink by Vallejo, adding it to my palette, and then I'm thinning it down with water, even though it's already very thin. What I want is really a glaze consistency. Like so. And then I'm going to apply it all over the lava, flakes and everything. And then let it dry fully before we continue. Next up I'm going to dry brush all the flakes, and the color I'm using is Dark Sea Grey by AK Interactive. Just make sure you don't have too much paint on your brush. We just want a light dry brush. Finally, for the lava, I've made a mix on my palette with 2 drops of yellow and 1 drop of orange. I mix them together and thin it down with a bit of water. And then I'm taking a very small brush. I'm using a size 00 from Artist Opus. And then I'm painting some embers in between the flakes here and there. You can do as many or as few of these as you want. But it will make a cool effect. just random dots here and there on the lava itself. And with that, the lava effect is complete. Next up, I'm going to paint the skull, and you should of course use your usual way to paint skulls, but I would like to show you my grimdark method. And what I'm beginning with is some Baneblade Brown. And with that, I'm adding a base coat all over the skull. This is then followed by a shade of Atramentum Black. And make sure you let it dry fully. Following that, I'm adding a layer of Wraith Bone from Citadel. I'm just making sure I'm avoiding all the crevices, such as the eye sockets, the mouth and so on. Once you are satisfied with your layer, it's time to add our second shade, and I'm using Voodoo Shade from the Army Painter. And then just apply this all over the skull. And let it dry fully. Following that, I'm going to add a varnish. The one I'm using is Storm Shield from Citadel Color, but you can use whatever varnish you prefer. And that's because in a couple of steps I'm going to be using some White Spirit. You'll see why. But first, add some varnish. Goon's Grime by Villainy Inc. is the name of the game for me when it comes to grimdark in a bottle. And I've added some to my palette and I'm applying this all over the skull. Just like that. If you like the way the skull looks now, just leave it at that. But I'm going to use some White Spirit because the Goon's Grime is an enamel product, and with the White Spirit we can manipulate and even remove the enamel product which just dried all over the skull. So, what I'm going to do is take this White Spirit, it's by AK Interactive by the way, and take my cotton bud, dip it in, and then just start gently removing the Goon's Grime from the most raised areas, just leaving it in the recesses. And this is also why I added a varnish earlier, so we are protecting the paint underneath. So play around with this until you find a satisfying result. Next up, I'm grabbing some heavy metal by the army painter, and this is for painting the steel floor. I thinned it down a bit with water, and then just apply it all over. And of course be careful not to hit the skull and the stones. And then I'm adding a shade of Atramentum Black all over. Following that shade, I'm then taking some transparent brown ink from Green Stuff World and adding it to my palette. And this is to make some variation on the base. Like so. And then I'm just applying it at random areas on top of the base, focusing mostly around the rocks and the skull. And then let it dry fully. The brown ink has stained our base nicely, so next I'm going to add a couple of pigments, and the first one is a dark red oxide by Green Stuff World. And just like the ink, I'm going to apply this in random areas. And I'm using a dedicated flat brush for this, also from Green Stuff World. Like I said, just apply this in random areas to stain it with this color. Following that, I cleaned my brush, and then I grabbed some light orange oxide and do the same again. But I'm trying to stay within the dark red areas we just applied. Roughly. And then I'm going to seal the pigment with some pigment fixture. Just apply this over the pigment and let it dry fully, so it will remain in place permanently and also maintain its dry look. The pigment fixer is almost dry, so now I can do the very last thing on this base, and that is to paint the rim of the base. And my color of choice is Abaddon Black, to really make it pop. And once this is dry, the base is complete. And that's all she wrote. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial, and if you want to make your own, please share your result on Instagram with me and tag me at Stender Painting. And with that, happy painting!